Echoes from the Golden Age tell us a 27-year-old director nobody believed in, shooting a movie that was already a disaster. Somehow invented the summer blockbuster by accident. The mechanical shark never worked. The shoot ran 159 days instead of 55. The budget more than doubled. Lee Marvin was offered the role of Quint and turned it down because he didn't want to cut his fishing vacation short and stick around for number one, because the man who wrote the novel this film is based on spent the rest of his life trying to undo what he created and never succeeded. Fact 15. The first director got fired for calling the shark a whale. Before Spielberg was ever attached, another director was already in place. He lost the job in a single meeting, during which he called the shark a whale, specifically comparing it to the whale from Moby Dick. Peter Benchley, the novel's author, was in the room and told producers plainly he didn't want to work with a director who couldn't distinguish between his shark and Melville's whale. The director was out. Spielberg, then a 27-year-old with only one feature film to his name, walked in and said he'd love to tell the story. He got the job because someone else confused two completely different marine animals. Fact 14. Dreyfuss turned it down twice, then saw his own face on screen. Richard Dreyfuss was convinced Jaws was going to be a disaster and turned it down not once but twice. He only changed his mind after watching a rough cut of his previous film, The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, and hating his own performance so badly that he panicked. He called Spielberg and said, "If I'm not working when this film comes out, I'll never work again." The man who became Hooper accepted the role out of pure self-doubt, terrified his career was already over before Jaws even started shooting. Fact 13. The shark was bigger than any real great white on Earth. The mechanical shark built for production, named Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer, was 25 feet long and weighed 1,208 pounds. The Smithsonian confirms the biggest real great white sharks reach approximately 20 feet, meaning the prop shark was physically larger than any actual great white that has ever been documented. The monster that terrified an entire generation was, in purely biological terms, a physical impossibility. No real shark of that size has ever been confirmed to exist. The most frightening shark in movie history was also the most scientifically implausible one. Fact 12. The 55-day shoot turned into 159 days. The budget more than doubled. Originally budgeted at $4 million with a planned 55-day shooting schedule, production spiraled badly. The final budget landed between $9 and $12 million, depending on the source, and filming ran from May through October 1974, 159 days in total. Spielberg calculated that during each 12-hour workday, only around 4 hours were actually spent filming. The rest was waiting, mechanical failures, seasickness, and weather. A production that should have been done by summer was still going in autumn, with no end clearly in sight. Fact 11. Lee Marvin passed because he didn't want to leave his fishing trip. Quint, the obsessive shark hunter, was almost played by Lee Marvin, a man famous for his no-nonsense masculinity and the kind of weathered authority the role demanded. He turned it down, not for creative reasons, not over salary. He was sport fishing in Cabo San Lucas and simply didn't want to cut his vacation short. Sterling Hayden was then considered, but the IRS would have seized his entire salary due to unpaid back taxes, so he declined too. 2 separate casting offers, 2 entirely unrelated life complications. Robert Shaw got the role by elimination. Fact 10. The entire cast was seasick almost every single day. Shooting on open water meant the cast and crew dealt with genuine seasickness throughout the entire production. Cast members regularly hopped between boats, sometimes falling into the water by accident. A speedboat pulling the Orca went too fast early in shooting and tore out the planking from the hull. Water rushed in, and the boat sank in approximately 2 minutes. The cameras went underwater with it, but the film inside was ultimately saved. Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw were all seasick for significant portions of the shoot. Fact 9. Shaw tried to film the Indianapolis speech completely drunk. It didn't work. The USS Indianapolis speech, widely considered one of the greatest monologues in cinema history, had a chaotic first attempt. Robert Shaw arrived to film it having been drinking heavily, tried to deliver the speech, and it was unusable. He came back the next day sober, and what you see in the finished film is that second clear-headed performance. Shaw had actually written the bulk of the monologue himself, condensing and rewriting an earlier draft by screenwriter John Milius. The greatest speech in the film belongs largely to the actor who delivered it. Fact 8. Shaw spent the entire shoot trying to break Dreyfuss. The feud between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss was real and documented by everyone on set. Shaw consistently baited Dreyfuss into situations where he was bound to fail, challenging him to dive off the Orca, challenging him to push-up contests, openly needling him in front of the crew. Roy Scheider said Shaw really thought Dreyfuss needed a slapping down. Dreyfuss later described Shaw as someone who had my number and could always get me. A play called The Shark is Broken, co-written by Shaw's own son Ian, ran on Broadway in 2023 based entirely on this dynamic. Fact 7. John Williams played the theme for Spielberg. He laughed in his face when composer John Williams sat down at a piano and played Spielberg the now iconic two-note motif, da-dum, da-dum. Spielberg laughed. He thought Williams was joking. He assumed the theme for the most anticipated thriller of the year was going to be something considerably more complex and dramatic. Williams was not joking. He played it again. Spielberg stopped laughing and realized what he was hearing. That two-note sequence, which Williams described as grinding away at you, just as a shark would do, became arguably the most recognized musical motif in film history. Fact 6. Locals pelted Spielberg's house with fish guts. Martha's Vineyard residents were not enthusiastic about a 159-day film shoot disrupting their island. At one point, locals allegedly pelted Spielberg's rented cottage with fish guts in protest. The production had taken over significant portions of the island, displaced local businesses, and worn out its welcome considerably before filming was anywhere near complete. The director making a film about a community terrorized by an unwanted predator was himself, in a modest but smelly way, being treated as one by the actual community he'd moved into for the summer. Fact 5. The shark never appeared on screen until 81 minutes into the film. Nobody planned that. Viewers don't get a full look at the shark until 1 hour and 21 minutes into the movie. This wasn't an artistic decision Spielberg made in pre-production. It was forced entirely by the fact that Bruce never worked properly. With no functioning shark to film, Spielberg shot fins, barrels, water disturbances, and characters' reactions instead. What became the film's most celebrated technique, building terror through what you don't see, was a series of desperate improvisations by a young director whose main prop refused to cooperate. The most acclaimed suspense technique in cinema history was an accident. Fact 4. The Academy snubbed it for Best Picture. The editor won instead. Jaws became the first film in history to gross more than $100 million at the domestic box office, inventing the concept of the summer blockbuster as it did so. Despite this, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences did not nominate it for Best Picture. What it did win was Best Editing for Verna Fields, Best Original Score for John Williams, and Best Sound, 3 technical awards recognizing the craft underneath the commercial phenomenon. The film that changed Hollywood forever was not considered by the industry's own voters to be among the best pictures of its year. Fact 3. Real great white shark populations collapsed after the film's release. What happened to real great white sharks after Jaws opened in 1975 was catastrophic. Shark hunting increased dramatically, fueled by fear the film had deliberately engineered. Great white shark populations collapsed in regions across the Atlantic and Pacific. The species, already vulnerable, was hunted at rates it hadn't experienced before. Peter Benchley, the man who wrote the novel, spent the remaining years of his life actively campaigning for shark conservation, giving interviews, writing articles, and appearing in documentaries specifically to try to undo the damage his own book had caused. He called his regret about the novel's impact genuine and irreversible. Fact 2. The town residents of the real Amity Island still haven't fully recovered. Martha's Vineyard served as Amity Island, and the impact of Jaws on real beach communities across America was documentable and lasting. Attendance at ocean beaches dropped measurably in the summer of 1975. Coastal tourism businesses reported significant revenue losses directly attributed to the film's release that season. Some beach communities reported that visitors specifically told them they were afraid to go in the water because of Jaws. A movie set on a fictional island about a fictional shark caused real economic damage to real coastal American communities for multiple consecutive summers, communities that had nothing to do with making it. Fact 1. The man who created the monster spent the rest of his life trying to kill it. Peter Benchley wrote the novel Jaws in 1973. It became one of the fastest-selling paperbacks in publishing history. The film sold more than 100 million tickets. His name is on both. And for the remaining 31 years of his life, Benchley worked actively and specifically to counteract what he had built. He became a prominent ocean conservationist, arguing publicly that the great white shark was not the mindless killing machine his novel had depicted, that the species was ecologically vital, and that the fear his story had generated was causing measurable, ongoing harm to shark populations worldwide. He wrote books about ocean conservation. He made documentary films about sharks. He gave speeches. He gave interviews. He said more than once and in plain terms that if he had known what his novel would do to shark populations, he would not have written it the way he wrote it. The man who invented Bruce spent 30 years trying to save the real versions of the animal he'd made the world afraid of. He died in 2006. Great white sharks remain a vulnerable species. That is Jaws. The echo fades. Tell us in the comments which fact surprised you most, and we'll see you in the next one.